Croeso I cyfarfod diochi cigydd am dod. Good afternoon, welcome to today's full council meeting of Wednesday, 7th of December 2022. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Democratic Services, have we had any apologies? Thank you, Mayor. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Sorry, Councillor Roberts.
Galsworthy as well, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Ian?
With reference to agenda item 5, I'm a member of Bedlinnock Community Council, but I've got dispensation to speak and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I'll just go on to agenda item number 2 and just remind everyone else as well. Members are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and prejudicial interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda in accordance with the provisions of the Local Government and Finance Act 1992 relating to council tax, the Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution and the Members' Code of Conduct. Are there any other members that wish to make a declaration of interest on any of the agenda items tonight? Sorry, Councillor Michelle.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to declare an interest as my husband works in the Council Tax Department.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle Jones. Councillor Jamie Scriven.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 7, I'm a trustee for the Merthyr Valley Homeless People's Fund.
So can I just be clear with members, when you're declaring an interest, are you saying that in your view is a prejudicial interest and you're not going to speak and vote on that item? Because I'll need to go back to Councillor Michelle Jones. Can you just say which item you were declaring on?
Can I just withdraw that, please? Thank you.
Councillor Scriven, did you say agenda item number 7?
But number 6, I meant. In regards to that, it's a bit of a difficult one, to be honest, Mountain Officer, because as much as I'm a trustee for the organisation, I'm not directly involved in the housing line of things. It's the People's Fund is set up directly to support tenants with emergency cases in grant funding. So I don't know where to sit on that one. If you've got any advice.
Bear with me 1 second. Let me just check. If you play no part in that transitional plan that is being approved as part of council policy, would that be right? Your role doesn't involve you in that plan.
Yes, I wouldn't be involved directly in any of that plan. I just wanted to be noted. I do have an involvement within the organisation. Thank you.
Then you don't need to declare an interest. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Ian Thomas has already declared his interest.
That's right.
Yeah, that's registered. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Agenda item number 3, to approve as accurate the minutes of previous meetings, which covers reports 3A to 3N, which are full council of 9th of November 2022, Cabinet of 9th of November 2022, Planning Regulatory Licensing of 16th of November 2022, Licensing Committee of 23rd of November 2022, Governance and Audit Committee of 28th of November 2022, Corporate Support and Resources Scrutiny Committee of 15th of November, Regeneration and Public Protection Scrutiny Committee of 22nd of November, Learning and Local Government Education Service Scrutiny Committee of 17th of October. I think I said 3A to 3N, but it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. 3A to 3H. The Council Leader, Gary Thomas, will be moving this report. Geraint?
They don't go slow tonight, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to move the minutes.
I second, Mr. Mayor.
You. Okay, we've had it. Councillor Geraint Thomas has moved it. Councillor Andrew Barry has seconded it. Has any member to raise, would like to raise anything before we take it to the vote? No, okay, can we put this to the vote then, please, monitoring officer?
Everyone can just press the button on their console now as required. You're going to have to be fast on that one.
Am I like to vote with your name on it? Yeah. I don't care.
And can I please ask the two members who are remote? So can I ask Councillor Claire Jones, can you please say whether you're voting in favour, against, or whether you're abstaining?
For.
Thank you. And
Thank
Councillor David Isaacs, can you also give us the same response as to whether you're for, against, or abstaining?
For.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, on my calculations, that is everybody.
I haven't voted,
Right.
but I don't know if I can, because mine's not working, and it would be doing.
Yes, so
With execs.
yes, if you do
Yeah.
that, I have to press it again. No.
Not working at all.
So can you just tell us your vote?
For.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I think that that is carried. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope everybody can bear with us because I'm sure everybody is trying to fix the gremlins. But Mr. Mayor, if you can press on, we'll see if we can still manage to get moving.
Okay. Agenda item number 4, corporate risk management strategy policy proposed amendments. To consider the report of the Chief Executive, the Cabinet Member for Governance and Resources, Councillor Andrew Barry, will be presenting and moving this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Corporate risk management strategy policy proposed amendments. Within our recently approved strategy and policy is a section that deals with risk appetite, which explains our tolerance and acceptance of risk in pursuing our operational objectives, in particular the circumstances in relation to the economic crisis and the impact on our financial objectives specifically. Myself, the leader, Councillor Dan Roberts, leader of the Labour Group, and Councillor Clive Jones had a lengthy discussion about the financial position last night. Revisions within this policy in particular need to allow greater flexibility considering the fluidity of the crisis and our need to react in a timely fashion. The strategy and policy is based on what is perceived as acceptable risk, defined by the Institute of Risk Management as the amount of risk that an organisation is willing to seek or accept in the pursuit of its long-term objectives. And in terms of risk tolerance, it is defined as the boundaries of risk taking outside which the organisation is not prepared to venture. At 3.3, Mr. Mayor, you will see that the Constitution does allow for a change in the Council decision within 6 months should 5 members propose a revision to be ratified by Council. Today, Cabinet approval in accordance with the Constitution was given to bring this to full Council for all members tonight to have the opportunity to ratify that recommendation. This is an unusual request, however, the Constitution says, and I quote, "The clear intent is that the motion should not be changed within 6 months, and so the process of having 5 councillors to move it is there to ensure it only happens in exceptional circumstances." And I think we can agree the financial crisis qualifies as exceptional circumstances. This report will allow for 3 risk categories to move from open to eager appetites, namely strategy risks, commercial risks, and property risks. All 3 are defined within the current and proposed changes at table 4.2. Where this can sometimes be described as a culture of risk management, this places more of a formal structure around that management and will allow a more flexible approach to achieving our proposed objectives. It is important to note that this does not equate to any additional risk to this authority, but does allow flexibility within the decision-making process, with the usual checks and balances with the appropriate cabinet and full council approval. And hence the recommendation of 2.1, the proposed vision of the risk policy as set out in section 4 be approved. Mr. Mayor, I move.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew Barry. Do we have a seconder for this agenda item? Councillor Michelle Jones.
Happy to second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Michelle Jones. To move this amendment, we need a further 3 members to come forward. Have we got another 3 members? Councillor Lisa Mitten, Councillor Clive Tuvey, Councillor Julie Jenkins. Okay. Okay, that's enough for that. So we'll move on to questions from members. None? No questions from members. Any comments from members? No comments from members. Okay, Monitoring Officer, can we take this to the vote, please?
Yes, so can I ask members, please, in the chamber to vote now?
Councillor Mayor, is vote registered? No. Okay.
So in that case, can I ask firstly, those who are remotely accessing, so Councillor Claire Jones, please, can you tell us whether you're voting for, against or abstaining?
For.
Thank you. Councillor David Isaacs, can you tell us whether you are voting for, against or abstaining?
For.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, can you tell us whether you are voting for, against or abstaining?
For.
Thank you, and that's carried.
Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Agenda item number 5, Council Tax Base for 2023-2024. To consider the report of the Chief Executive. The Cabinet Member for Governance and Resources, Councillor Andrew Barry, will be presenting and moving this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Tax Base for 23-24. Members will recognise this report as being the first stage in our council tax setting process for the authority in the Bedlinog and Trelewis Community Council area in accordance with the legislative requirements set out at 3.1 page 52 of your papers. This stage of the process allows the authority to understand our financial requirements for the coming year. The calculations refer to the number of properties in each valuation band, discounts, exemptions, changes to the valuation list over the coming year. The last list is shown at 3.2. Tonight, Mr. Mayor, we have Mark Price with us, who everyone will know from Revs and Bens, who will be happy to take any technical questions on what is a very technical report, and hence the recommendation at 2.1. Taking into account the number of properties in each valuation band, discounts, reductions for disabilities and future likely changes to the valuation list, it is recommended that the following resolution be approved. Pursuant to this report and in accordance with the local authorities and council tax regulations 2004, the number calculated by the Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council for 2023-24 shall be 18,617.78, and the area covered by Bedlinog and Trelewis Community Council for 2023-24 shall be 1,171.52. I move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew Barry. Do we have a seconder? Sir David
I'd
Hughes.
like to second that, please.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Any questions from members? Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It does say in the recommendation 2.1 that Councillor Barry has read out, the last part of the first sentence, and future likely changes in the valuation list. I read somewhere the properties in the, I think it's probably Wales we're talking about, are to be having a reevaluation. Do we know when that's likely to take place?
The reevaluation that you're referring to, Councillor Jones, excuse me, in respect of business rates.
Ah.
There's a new business rates NDR list which will come into effect on the 1st of April 2023. You are right that there are discussions regarding council tax reform which are currently ongoing, looking at how things are going to be done in the future. But at the moment, there is nothing further other than what's been presented to you.
Thanks. I mean, I'm aware that the Welsh Government are looking at how council tax is calculated, but perhaps I read this maybe incorrectly, but I was under the impression that sometime in the not too distant future, the domestic properties were due for a reevaluation. That's not the case, is it?
That may be the case, but obviously that's the decision for Welsh Government to take. We haven't had a revaluation since 2005
Yeah.
within Wales, and 1993, for England.
Mm.
At the present time, there is no definite date as regards to when a revaluation may take place.
Okay, thanks very much.
Just to add to that, Mr. Mayor, we've been lobbying obviously for a while now about the revaluation of all properties in Wales. Ultimately, the assessment by the Institute for Fiscal Studies says that if that happens, then Merthyr could end up with around 20 to 25% lower valuation than the rest of Wales, which would mean a reduction in council tax for the people of Merthyr of around £200, which is great news. But in terms of what we would receive, that makes it difficult for us. So the lobbying that we've carried out has been along the lines of the mechanism that Welsh Government are looking at to reevaluate council tax is all well and good, but it's just a mechanism. What we need in Merthyr is, if that council tax rate falls, the revenue grant needs to increase. And if the revenue grant increases, we don't want an equivalence of what we've got at the moment. We want an equivalence in the ability to provide services the same as the rest of Wales. And that's the important ask within this. The technical aspect is one issue. What we need is an amount of money which will allow us to provide services on an equivalence to your Cardiffs and your Monmouths and your Vale of Glamorgans. Thanks, Mayor.
Questions from members? No. Okay, any comments from members? No comments, and can we take this to the vote then, please, Monitoring Officer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If everybody would like to vote now in the chamber. And then can I ask Councillor Claire Jones, can you please let us know whether you're voting for, against or abstaining?
For, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Isaacs, can you let us know whether you're voting for, against or abstaining?
For.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, can you let us know whether you're voting for, against or abstaining?
For.
Thank you. That's carried.
Monitoring Officer. Okay, agenda item number 6, Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan. We consider the report of the Deputy Chief Executive. The Leader and Cabinet Member for Housing and Regeneration, Councillor Geraint Thomas, will be presenting and moving this report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report provides the background to the requirement placed on local authorities by Welsh Government to produce a 5-year rapid rehousing transition plan for 2022-2027. The Rapid Rehousing Transition Plan sets out the priorities of Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council and its partner agencies for homelessness prevention, and alleviation and housing-related support services to address homelessness in an efficient and trauma-informed way for the next 5 years. It incorporates the priorities that were included in the Housing Support Programme strategy, and both strategies should be read in conjunction with each other. The report seeks the approval from members to approve and adopt the rapid rehousing approach to address the presenting needs of homelessness and reducing the use and current over-reliance of temporary accommodation. As you will see in the report, there are no financial implications for the local authority. But before moving to the recommendations, can I just thank Jennifer Rees and Susan Lewis-Abbott and the rest of the housing team for the hard work they've done into this plan. So if I move to the recommendations in 2.1, that the rapid rehousing transition plan be approved. I so move, Chair. Mr. Mayor.
The seconder.
Happy to
Councillor Michelle
second.
Simmons.
Happy to second the report, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any questions from members? Councillor Jamie Scriven.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do apologise. I've read through all the reports. I'm very new to the housing side of things. I'm not an expert, so I just have a few questions I wanted to ask. Under 4.4, one of the things I wanted to ask about is whether or not development's the only option that we can actually look at. So I'm currently aware we've got 9 HMOs in place, and figures at the moment are showing a preference for a bed and breakfast accommodation over anything similar to an HMO or a hostel. But do we have any qualitative data around why that is, why residents or tenants would prefer in a bed and breakfast over the HMOs that we've got?
In terms of our client, the HMOs have shared facilities. So for many people, unlike the Cardiffs and the other sort of cities that have universities and shared culture sort of status, it is not the norm in Merthyr to have shared accommodation. So that is always quite difficult for people. Whereas within the B&Bs, they are ensuite facilities. So that's one of the key reasons people would prefer a B&B room self-contained rather than a HMO. It's key to note from an authority perspective, the financial impact of HMO is pretty much almost half of what it would be for a B&B placement, though. So we need to factor in the impact on the budgets.
Great, thank you. And I welcome the fact that we've all voted tonight and we've taken some steps to around the risk register in terms of property and our strategies and things like this. It'd really help. So one of the things I was going to ask as well is if we have insufficient stock at the moment in our RSLs and we've got this huge demand, specifically for 1-bed units, have there been any discussions around using the current stock that we've got that are larger than a 1-bed unit and changing those in terms of use, that they could be similar to B&Bs, and perhaps that might take some of the pressure off the amount of people we've currently got waiting for specifically 1-bed units? I'm just wondering, are those conversations happened with our RSLs?
Sorry, this is working. Yeah, so in terms of the housing stock, there isn't a surplus of familial accommodation, unfortunately. We have utilised some external funding to do some sort of innovative sort of solutions where we've transformed some familial homes into 2 1-bed flats using some innovative housing funding. But the unintended consequences of the upcoming Renting Homes Act being implemented has meant that many private landlords are now selling up. So the demand on familial homes has increased threefold at the moment, and it is continuing to rise, as is the cost of living crisis contributing to this. So unfortunately, there is no sort of surplus stock that we can utilise. We are trying to look at multiple sort of solutions, whether we look at modern methods of construction to have quicker sort of sites, whether we use transitionary accommodation, whether we use just our social housing grant, and any other external grants to the best of our ability to try and maximise the number of units we're trying to progress at any one time. I think we have been slowed down with the effects of the pandemic on the construction sector and the volatility on that's had, including a number of the contractors going into administration. So it has slowed things down, but things are moving. So there is a lot of light at the end of the tunnel in terms of development, but unfortunately it's just taking some time.
Yeah, thank you. I only have a few more questions, but that leads nicely into my questions under 5.1. Because obviously, as you've mentioned, the Rent and Homes Wales Act came into play on the 1st of December. We've had a number of Section 21 since going back as far as July. In my own experience, they've been coming through, and a lot more in the recent days in this quarter before that came into effect. So do we have a sort of an idea of how much of an impact that's had on our housing figures at the moment? I didn't see anything when I looked through the appendix to the report myself, but is there an idea of how much of an impact that's had?
I haven't got the figures to hand, but we can certainly get those figures in terms of over the last few months. We have seen an increase, quite a visible increase. The housing team themselves are dealing with far more families than they have done for a number of years. But I wouldn't like to give a figure right now without checking with the operational housing team, but it is having a significant impact in terms of the numbers coming through on a weekly basis, pretty much trebling at the moment in terms of familial presentations. And the majority of those are those Section 21 no-fault notices. And much of the anecdotal feedback that the landlords are giving us it is a direct result of the responsibilities that would be placed on them under renting homes.
Yeah, I only have two more questions. I will get through them quickly. Under 5.1 again, in regards to our better incentivising private renting sector offer, how many private landlords do we currently have that take up LHA tenants, and how do we currently sell that offer to them? So in what ways are we actually doing that?
I believe it's just the one at the moment. We have partnerships where we work with private landlords, but in terms of a bespoke agreement with ourselves, where I mentioned we looked at changing some familiar homes into one-bed accommodations. We've done that quite recently using some innovative housing funding with a local private landlord who now has 2 tenants and two flats within a previous familiar home. We have recently signed up to the private leasing scheme with Welsh Government. So we now have a private leasing scheme officer who is engaging with a number of private landlords. We have also asked our Empty Homes Office and Environmental Health to send a letter to all of those who own empty properties to ask would they like to consider or speak to us about the opportunities that the leasing scheme provides, which is basically that we would manage that property for them. We can provide capital grant over a period of time and we return that property back in the same condition. So there are currently 2 or 3 landlords that are near to closing the deal, really, as long as all of the conditions can be met. The difficulty is we have seen a marked decrease in the engagement that we've had over time prior to the sign up of the private leasing scheme, just purely because of the market rents at the moment. The LHA rate is around £74 a week for those on benefits and low income. So I think in terms of the market rents, we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of pounds increase per month in terms of rental, which just makes it no business sense to many of our private landlords to rent to our clients, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you for that. So just to confirm, it's just one landlord at the moment on register, and I feel that you think you're close to securing a contract with, yeah?
One directly in an agreement with ourselves.
Yeah.
We do work with other private landlords, so we have got other clients in private tenancy, so I can get a figure for you in terms of who we have, but that's not a direct arrangement. It's just sort of ongoing historical sort of relationships.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And my last question was in regards to referrals to HS, to the Housing Support Grant. Of course, looking through all the data, we've got mental health issues being the second highest primary need, with a co-occurrence between substance misuse with that, which is quite concerning. And a lot of tenancy breakdown referrals have often cited that, as you said in the report. So we've got a major issue, but I'm just wondering, in terms of tenancy support and where they go for help, do we have any form of directories in place for officers, counsellors even, and for the tenants to access for themselves? It can always sometimes be a case of just them needing to know where they can go for help in order to get that mental health support that they need. And I think if we don't have that in place, it's something we need to do as soon as possible in order to be that more preventative measure, rather than waiting for crisis point where they've then got to go, well, I've got a Section 21 or I've got this problem and now I need help. Whereas if we're informed beforehand, perhaps we can mitigate some of the issues around it.
Absolutely. And in terms of the access to those services, we have a service directory, so we can share that with all members again in terms of the latest sort of update in terms of the providers that we commission and what type of support they offer. We have a gateway officer in housing who will take any referrals and put the individuals to the best possible support. In terms of our sort of partnership working around us, all of our partner RSLs and our partner support providers and the third sector, we regularly attend sort of forums where we push the opportunities that HSG provide, with a caveat that Merthyr has a disproportionate sort of quantum of those with complex and multiple sort of needs. So the funding that we get is challenging in terms of being able to meet all of that need, but you know, they certainly we don't hold waiting lists at the moment, and everybody in need of that support is moved on to the appropriate service. So we'll make a note to recirculate that through to council and to members as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for that, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Scriven. I noticed, Alan Owen has got his hand up. So before I go to Clive, I'm going to bring Alan on if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Scriven's obviously it's a very complex interlocking issue around housing, around complex social issues. Going back into the last administration, we had a series of workshops for all members to explore some of the issues, the difficulties, and the solutions. Can I suggest, Mr. Mayor, that in January we have another workshop to explore all these issues?
Thank you, Alan. Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too got a few questions on the report. Under paragraph 3.6, and it comes to about the 6th line down, and I'll read it because we're talking about complex needs, and it says, and a distinct need for more units of supported accommodation to allow those with more complex needs to work towards settled and sustainable accommodation. As this is a plan for the next 5 years, well, 4 now, because we're into the end of 22, how many of these supported accommodation have been identified that we need?
So we conducted a recent mapping exercise of all of those placed within our supported accommodations and our B&Bs. So we currently have 4 different sort of supported accommodations in 2 emergency hostels, 1 young person supported accommodation, and a Housing First scheme. On top of that, we were looking at around 120 to 130 people across the B&B provisions, and at least a third of those had multiple and/or complex needs. Many of which we wouldn't put into a sort of tenancy without any level of support, because we're setting people up to fail. They wouldn't sustain. So we are looking at a minimum of sort of 40, 50 people that have the more complex needs currently.
And would that be 1 or more blocks?
It will depend on the type of accommodation. So what we would suggest, for example, we are developing a provision within Marsh House at the moment, which will give us another 22 units of accommodation to move people out of B&B. But given the quantum of people in one facility, we would be looking at low level. So those with lower level needs, of which we also have many. In terms of supported accommodation for those with complex needs, from the research that we've done and what's been done across other local authorities in Wales and further, the sort of limit on these type of provisions are 8 to 10 people to provide that support without having any sort of wider issues. So we would be looking at sort of between 4 and 5 additional on top of Marsh House to meet the current need that we see of those in B&B.
Okay, but we haven't identified where they could be built.
No, I think historically, what we have done, we've talked about the need and we've had a look and discussed with the relevant ward members what sites we're potentially looking at. And at the moment, we haven't had any agreement that any of the facilities would be suitable. So we are working on a presentation and report to CMT to have a look at how we overcome the barriers that we've seen so far and provide a clear criteria in which we will apply when looking to identify supported accommodation and what the agreed process is going forward to make sure that we reduce the sort of bureaucracy in getting something forward and make a meaningful change. So there are none identified now, but we are looking to produce a report quite quickly in January.
Okay, thank you. I've got another question on paragraph 4.6, page 57. And it reads, the HSG team has recently commissioned an innovative new regional scheme which links health to the provision of substance misuse and specialist mental health nurses and housing to support service users. Could you tell me, Suzanne, the regional scheme, is that on the footprint of Cwm Taf Magnog Health Board's area? So does it include representatives from other local authorities too, apart from ourselves, the health service, housing staffs, I suppose? Who else would be part of that regional team? And how then is that financed? How will it work?
Okay, so the yeah, you're right, it's the Cwm Taf footprint. So it's RCT, Bridgend and Merthyr who partake in this particular project that was developed through the Housing Support Grant, and it's funded directly through the Housing Support Grant itself with investment from health also. The makeup of this is essentially specialist mental health nurses. We have substance misuse professionals from the third sector, along with colleagues from health and housing to support. And I suppose the pilot of this project at the moment is just attached to those who are suffering sort of additional trauma, that have experienced ACEs, that have complex needs, and more so are residing in our temporary supported accommodations. But where we identify individuals who need that support, if there's capacity, we'll extend. So the project is relatively small at the moment as the pilot, but given some of the indicative outcomes showing really positive sort of results in the individuals that are being worked with, we're hoping that this week is something we can roll out with some more investment from health. But again, the pressure on the HSG budget is quite acute at the moment.
Okay, thanks. And on paragraph 4.7, bottom of page 57, it's the last sentence there. You referred as part of this, the development of an additional extra care facility. Merthyr Tydfil is a corporate priority and is one of the key priorities in the Council's Recovery Transformation Improvement Plan. Are we talking about older people, younger people, or is it one of those?
So the extra care facility, and it's a good point, Councillor, in terms of the plan. So we are sort of discussing a lot around the supported accommodation, but this is a plan to help everybody in Merthyr and broaden the range of accommodation to meet all of our presenting need. So that will include familial homes, that will include adapted stock, that will include our general needs, our larger family homes, as well as supported accommodation. In terms of the extra care facility, we are in the very early stages of it. We are applying to the Land and Buildings Fund in Welsh Government for some feasibility works to assess the viability of this potential site. And the initial brief that we provided, this would be a 50+ majority extra care, but we would allow flexibility of around 10% of the 60 units for those under 50 who would suit the facility. So there may be some cognitive function issues, there may be those with learning difficulties who may thrive in a setting like that. So what we didn't want to do is exclude some individuals who would be key there. We're looking at a minimum of 60 units. And the all of the flats would be also adapted with some that would be more suitable for the more sort of acute adaptations like ceiling track hoist, things like that. So we're trying to help take the pressures off the disability facility grants pressures on the budget as well.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor. Alan Owen.
Yeah, just to reinforce, because obviously we've mentioned, Suzanne's mentioned the housing support grant several times during the this particular session about this report. The pressure on the housing support grant in Merthyr due to the complexities of our issue is really great at the moment. And as Suzanne mentioned previously, we've made multiple representations to Welsh Government about the grant we've actually been allocated in proportion to the issues that we face. So obviously in the future, it's a finite amount of grant. So unfortunately, we will have to make some very difficult decisions about what we support and what we don't support.
Thank you, Alan. Any other questions from members? Okay, I've got one. Suzanne, this is obviously a challenging issue, as you mentioned, and I'm sure a range of solutions are being looked at. And the Deputy Chief Executive mentioned a workshop in January after Councillor Jamie Scriven's questions. You mentioned overcoming barriers when it comes to elected members' concerns, which obviously there were quite a few over the last couple of years. Can you just clarify that if this is voted through now tonight, that elected members will be consulted on anything that is proposed in their ward?
Yes, there's currently no plans to change the process in which we partake we've always been really open and transparent in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And if any buildings, land is identified, then as we always have done, we will engage with ward members, you know, before I suppose, looking at any of these. So there'll be no changes to that sort of tact.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. Okay, no other questions from members? Nobody indicating want comments from members? Councillor Clive Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's a mammoth task awaiting this authority as part of this plan in the next 4 years or so, because the staff in the Housing Strategic Department have just done a cleansing job and updating the housing waiting list. And there are currently 1,856 on the register. And of that figure, 1,563 are single people. So there's a huge problem here that we've got to try and get to grips with. I think the operative word in the report is how rapid that can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Claire Jones.
Thank you. Bear with me, please. Sorry. I would just like to say that I welcome the plan and thank you for the report to both of you. I eagerly look forward to the update and the prospect of what will happen in the next 5 years with the needs of the homeless individuals and families. And I welcome the fact that you're saying there will be an efficiency and a trauma-informed way that you have planned. My concern obviously is the stock of one-bedroom accommodation. So I look forward in having updates on the one-bedroom stock. And I would just like to say, you know, well done. This means a lot to me, as many of you know. So I look forward to well done, Suzanne and Jen. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay, Claire. Thank you, Councillor Claire Jones. Councillor Geraint Thomas. Anybody else? Because Geraint will close this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to say a thank you as well to the officers for all the work that's gone on. I understand that there's a massive housing crisis at the moment and the challenges they're up against. But there's just some comments from myself and perhaps some areas that I want to bring up that I feel that we've missed specifically around, there doesn't seem to be anything within this plan about how we will address human habitation issues and the issue that will lead to with neglected houses. It's clear to say that there are certain areas and properties, and we'll be aware of as councillors with cases we deal with, where there's been neglect, whether that's from the landlord side of things or whether that's from the tenants themselves. And I guess there's a question then about how we hold ourselves further to account around eviction notices and how they deal with these issues as they go on and become prevalent. And it can be really easy to look at those problems on an individual case, which happens quite regularly. But when that is the case and it's not being dealt with properly and with quick action, that can spiral out into other households and cause further problems. I'd refer to a case that we've dealt with recently within my own ward in Pendarren, where we're suffering with an epidemic of rats at the moment, which has been experienced by all in the areas of 2nd, 1st, 3rd and 4th Avenue. And we had a family that needed to be tested for Weil's disease. And that previously mentioned Renting Homes Act that we're referring to. There's further conditions that are going to be referred to now as the 29 matters that will be around areas such as damp and mould, and they do cover domestic hygiene, pests and refuse issues, and the list goes on about what it refers to. But I do believe this strategy is missing some key issues around how we work around that issue of habitable homes. As an example, with that case I've referred to, that family was no longer able to live in that property because of the extent of the issue. They've then had to be moved as a result of that, and that creates an issue on the housing list. It creates an issue with an empty property. So I do think that we need to be aware of that and keeping that in the back of what's going on. And we need to work with RSLs to make sure the homes are habitable, and that it needs to be a key consideration when we move forward on top of the points that are already in the plan of what we're looking to do. Because what we want to make sure we're doing is that we prevent further support being needed when we do get residents into a permanent accommodation. We don't want to have to be coming back to that and saying it's no longer habitable and we've got to move them. So I do appreciate the report and things doing, but it isn't only the right support at the right time. I think it needs to be the right support, the right time, with the right standards of living included in that, and something that we need to be aware of. Also, in regards to 16 to 25-year-olds making up a significant proportion of those presenting as homeless, and the 4th highest referral number for the housing support grant. And when you look further at it, it's that 40% of the demand for a 1-bed unit is for under 35-year-olds. There's a huge risk here for our recovery strategies and sustainability plans for economic prosperity if we can't home our younger generations or the future of the county borough, and we fail them here. We're going to build like an habitual issue with mistrust around the system of government that we hold over them if we just can't afford to fail that younger generation, especially around housing. Because if we can't support them in a housing crisis, they're going to start looking to move to other authorities. They're going to look for other places to live and rehome their families. And that's something as an authority in the economic issue that we're in, we just can't afford to be in that situation. We need people to want to live in Merthyr Tydfil. We need them to be proud of where they're living from, and we need them to be going out into the town and spending within the area, or we're never going to recover from the effects of COVID and the issue that we're in financially. Another point that I would make is that I'd ask if, as councillors, we can receive more information around the banding criteria for housing priorities. That's just to support cases that we're dealing with. A lot of the stuff that we deal with is tenants coming to us and asking to be moved on the housing register, or saying, why have I not been supported for this case or for that house? And it's just to have a bit more understanding, because I know I've read through the report, but it's very brief. It doesn't give a lot of detail about what constitutes as being placed in those specific bands. So I think it would just be handy to be able to explain to a resident why they're at a certain band and what's put them in that position. Just that it's not a case of always being said, well, I should have been supported to have that house or this house. Just a bit more understanding on our side of things, really. And again, I just want to reiterate, I really appreciate the pressure that you've got on you. And I support completely the need for this item and the plan going forward. I just don't want us to lose focus of those prevalent issues as well going forward from this, but I'm really happy to support this plan. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jamie Scriven. Any other comments? Councillor Geraint Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I've got to be honest, I think we've had a real good debate on this item tonight, and some real good questions and some excellent comments as well. And Jamie, I agree with you, on a lot of those points. We need young people to have homes of their own. so they can happy to live in Merthyr, work in Merthyr, and spend their money in Merthyr Tydfil. I think we've got to read this report in conjunction with other strategies and other policies we've got in place, because you may find a lot of information is already there. But I think what Alan said earlier about having another workshop, I think is important, so we can get everything on the table and those questions can be asked by members and everybody's clear on that. As we know in Merthyr, I know most of the members know that we have a high cohort of people with complex needs, with substance misuse and mental health. So the regional pilot that's taking place at the moment is showing success, and hopefully that can grow and be rolled out into the future. I think preventative actions is where we are, isn't it? If we can get in early doors, stop people getting evicted, and hopefully stop people getting themselves in a mess with mental health problems as well. I think that's very, very important. So, like I said earlier, thank you very much for the work, ladies. It's been fantastic, and the whole team. And hopefully now we can take this forward into the new year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Geraint-Thomas. Can we put this to the vote, monitoring officer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If everybody in the chamber can please vote. Thank you. So can I ask Councillor Claire Jones, are you voting for, against or abstaining, please?
For.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor David Isaacs, can you please tell us, are you voting for, against or abstaining?
For.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, can you say whether you are voting for, against or abstaining?
For.
Thank you. And that's carried.
Thank you, monitoring officer. Agenda item number 7, Household Waste and Recycling Centre, HWRC, van permit scheme. This is an information report. Agenda item number 8, child acceptance of trade waste at the Household Waste and Recycling Centre, HWRC Dowlas. This is an information report. Agenda item number 9, to deal with any other urgent business or correspondence. I've had none. Agenda item number 10, to receive communications from their worship the mayor. They have none. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and I formally declare this meeting closed.